Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode here at Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes, and I'm the Chief Sales Sergeant at Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Now, just like on the battlefield here at Bulletproof Selling, we go by a motto, and that's that hope is not a strategy. It didn't keep people alive on the battlefield, and it does not keep salespeople successful in this great career called sales. And so we are here. Our mission at Bulletproof Selling is to remove hope from how salespeople sell. And you'll get to hear a lot about how we do that today. But over the course of 100 plus episodes, I think we've been rolling through now multiple years, we bring on guests because I could talk to you all day about the value of removing hope, but we find it really useful to bring in outside views, people that are managing sales teams, that have worked in sales, that are coaching salespeople, that are there to really get their hands dirty in the field of sales. And so we've been able to get Hall of Fame speakers, best-selling authors, folks that are managing multinational sales teams, and of course, folks that are helping those national and multinational sales teams remove hope from how they sell as well. And what removes hope? Well, that's exactly what we get to do with every single one of our guests. From day one on this show, we dial in with our guests on where they see salespeople relying on hope more than they should, and we develop what removes hope, which is a system. We help them develop sales systems, which you can use no matter the size of your goal or the size of your team. And we've been able to, over the last couple of episodes, if you're following us linearly, if you didn't just hop onto this episode because you like the title, if you're really a subscriber of Bulletproof Selling, and if you're not, I encourage you to get over there on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the places where podcasts can be found, and subscribe. Because if you think of the valuable ways that you can spend your time learning, why not get something every single week that is going to help you immediately get better in what you do? And one easy way to do that is to remove just one little sliver of hope from how you sell, whether it's how you generate new conversations, how you engage in those folks when you're on the phone with them or in a meeting, how you close deals, how you generate great referrals. Over the course of 100 episodes, we've been able to hit just about every spot in the sales cycle. But one area that we haven't dove into yet, which is why I'm so excited about today's guests, is what do I do if I'm standing up a new organization or I've been promoted? I know we say that, great salespeople sometimes or usually don't make great sales leaders, but a lot of us find ourselves in those situations by hook, by crook, or maybe that is really where we're belonging inside of an organization. We're mediocre at sales or we're great at sales, but hey, leadership is really where our future is. Maybe that's your case. But what do you do in those early positions? How do you make sure that you're not relying on hope, hoping that your salespeople are out there engaging in the activities that they need to do, hoping that they're managing pipeline as well as you did, or as well as that you would just advise them to if you could have those one-on-one conversations? My guest today, just like me, has seen a lot of situations where new sales leaders step into the seat. They're in that commander's position. They're on the front line of business, which is sales, by the way. If you're in sales, you are the tip of the spear of your organization, to use military terminology, and they fail. They fail because they rely on hope. So my role as a military war correspondent, a U.S. Marine, as a sergeant embedded inside of Marine Corps teams, was to study how those Marines removed hope on each and every mission. And I'm so honored, I'm so blessed to be able to do that for salespeople today, because this is a great career. It is the front line of business. And without further ado, because I could talk about how much I love this all day, but I want to hear from our guest about new sales leadership, the mistakes they make where they're relying on hope. So let me welcome onto the show Mr. John Hoskins. John, welcome, sir, to Bulletproof Selling.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for inviting me, and look forward to having a conversation about hope.
And you can tell, John, I'm excited about this topic, what happens with new sales leaders. But before we dive into it, because I know this is the work you get to do every single day, looking at your LinkedIn profile, I mean, you are what the new generation calls an OG of sales. Like you are an original go-getter, an original gangster, whatever term you want to use. Working for Xerox back in the 70s. I mean, that's like door knocking. That's like, you were probably passing guys that were selling encyclopedias on the way up and down, to your meetings. Talk to us a little bit about your journey through sales and how you ended up in the seat you're in now, which is coincidentally building sales systems for salespeople. Talk to us a little bit about where that journey's taken you.
Sure. So, my beginning in sales I was 11 years old, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I was knocking on doors selling magazines. So, and that,
Nice.
ended up into a career in the magazine industry for, several years. When I got out of the military, I had a franchise in Toronto, Ontario with McLean Hunter. And then I went to a party, and a recruiter was there and said, "Hey, we're looking for people at Xerox. You should come to Xerox." And I said, "Oh, gee, I don't want to sell copiers. That's just not me." And she said, "No, this isn't copiers. This is their learning systems division, which you may be familiar with professional selling skills and all of the content that came out of Xerox Learning Systems." So I spent a decade there, and then left and went to become EVP of sales and marketing for a bank consulting firm in San Francisco. I vested my stock in 5 years and started a company with a colleague of mine from Xerox, Glenn Jackson, in 1990. We built that up in 2006. We sold it to BTS, a Swedish-based consultancy, a couple $100 million business today. And I was going to retire, but I was 56, so I got bored playing golf. And I started a foundation for teenage kids, and then I started a sales assessment business, was still going today. And then I had a bucket list thing in 2016. I was in Vancouver, British Columbia on a summer getaway from the heat in Scottsdale. And I said to my wife, "I'm going to write a book." And she said, "Okay, go ahead." And so I did. No expectation of starting another company, but the phone rang and the email lit up, and here I am today. We have about 25 channel partners around the country. I've got a CEO who actually was a former Miller Heiman guy, so he's very familiar with the training industry. And we've had a terrific run. I mean, the first quarter of this year, we've done as much revenue in the first quarter of this year as we did all last year.
Oh, that's amazing. Amazing. So I didn't know that you were a veteran, because on your LinkedIn profile, that's not one of the past employment things that you have. And I like to do a little bit of research on my guest, kind of build out a target package to help me know where to go. Talk to me a little bit about your military service, because I'm sure it's influenced the way that you think about sales.
Well, I was a reservist, so I couldn't give full credit to my duty. It was 6 months of active duty and then weekend warrior thing. It actually was during the Vietnam era, so I was fortunate and I never really went into battle. But if you have a C-124, I can fix your propeller.
That's actually a really important job. I can tell you on the Marine Corps side, if we didn't get our food, our chow, our water, things really started to get ugly, because we still had to make that mission work. So if it wasn't for supply drops like the propellers you were repairing, it wouldn't happen. So thank you very much for the folks on the ground. I'm always curious then to figure out where this journey then has landed you in the conversation that you and I had right before the show started, where you find that the folks that you're serving best are those folks that are stepping into leadership positions on sales teams. This really just leads into my question that I want to ask you is, where do you see these people relying on hope more than they should? Are they hoping that their salespeople will just continue to carry the day? Are they hoping they'll figure it out as they go? Where does hope enter the picture, and what impact does that have on sales results?
Well, a new sales leader has been brought in to make something happen, some change. And typically it's grow the top line, improve margins, reduce turnover, improve win rates, shorten sales cycles, improve forecast accuracy. I mean, I can go down the list. But they got a lot of pressure on them because they've been hired to do that. I think the first question they would ask themselves, if I was doing that again, what I would do is, who are my lieutenants? Do I have the right horses, particularly the frontline sales leader? So our focus is entirely on the frontline sales leader and in developing them as masterful coaches of the sales team. The epiphany I had after writing the book is, people would call and say, I want to get my sales team to sell like this. And I thought about building a sales training program. And I in like 24 hours, I said, don't do that. And the reason I said that is, for years, I sold sales training events, 2 days, 3 days, whatever it was. But what happened 30 days later, 60 days later? Pretty much people went back to what they were doing, right?
Yep.
And so I said, what we really need to do is put in place a coaching system. And we have to define what quality looks like so that everybody has a common understanding of what quality sales call is. And for me, the quality sales call is the beginning of the production cycle. So like in the manufacturing environment, Six Sigma, you don't put quality in at the end and inspect everything that comes off the line. You build quality in from the very beginning. So if you ask somebody, why do you have lousy forecasts that are, not accurate? It goes back to the qualities of the sales calls that people are making. So the hope I think that the sales leaders may sometimes have is that I've got a great frontline sales leadership team. We hire the best people in the industry, and we really don't need to coach or train them. I call that a
That's
zombie
fair.
idea.
Well, one of our guests actually brought that to us on a previous show. He said that the number one challenge that folks had in hiring salespeople, this is one of our guests in the last 2 or 3 episodes, was that they're looking for only 2 things, and they're both the wrong things. The first one was, does this person have experience in our industry? Not whether they can sell or not, but do they have any experience in the industry, and do we like them in the interview? So, then those are the only 2 things. So I know one aspect of a new sales leader is going to often be bringing on new salespeople, right? They're the people with ultimate responsibility for managing the size of their team and for scaling it out. So if they're only looking for, do I like the person and do they have any industry experience? Those are the only 2 benchmarks. It's no surprise that the quality, as you mentioned, at the early stage of that manufacturing process is off. So why wouldn't you have defective stuff that kicks out of the assembly line? So
Yeah.
I'm interested then to find out the sales leaders that you coach that are new, because a lot of our listeners are going to be in this position, or they will be in this position. What are some of the first couple of mistakes you see these folks make out of the gate that are like those lessons learned, those speed bumps that we know if we begin to really knock over these, we're going down the wrong path? What are some early indicators, if you will, some leading indicators of things probably not going in the direction we want them to if we're new leaders on a sales team?
So, it's a matter of their diagnosis of efficiency issues versus effectiveness issues. And sometimes if they see an issue that's an effectiveness issue, like the quality of a call, but they put in efficiency initiatives like CRM, well, CRM isn't going to affect the quality of the call. So the mistake they make is they put an efficiency initiative in place for what is an effectiveness problem, or vice versa. What we try to advocate, and this may be old school, but it's the 4-legged call. The manager being on the call with the representative, observing the call, pre-call planning, post-call debriefing, offering feedback, and building skills as they go along. That to me is the fastest path to revenue growth. And today it would be a Zoom call. It doesn't have to be in person, but the same situation exists. Unfortunately, a lot of new sales leaders, what they will do at the front line is they become superstar salespeople. They take over the call, and the next thing you know, the client's trying to work with the manager versus work with the sales rep. So there's a lot of pitfalls, if you will, that we try to prevent with the coaching system.
So there's a difference then between coaching a player on the field and saying, listen, quarterback, I know what you were hired to do, but I can do this better. So I'm just going to take the ball from you and run it, which I know you and I have both seen sales leaders do that because they know they could do a better job, but there's no scalability in that. You have to have people that can execute at a minimally viable level in order to be able to scale that organization. So I'm really interested in building a sales system around great first steps for a new leader, because this is something that a lot of sales leaders are going to find themselves in. So think about removing hope on the battlefield. And I'm sure you learned this when you're in the military, even reservists learn this, because I know you were in boot camp at some point. All they do at boot camp is just teach us systems. Here's how to tie your shoe. Here's how to make your bed. Here's how to clean your weapon, so that you can do it without really having to put a lot of conscious thought in it. And I learned on the battlefield why that's so important. While I'm cleaning my weapon, I've got to have a 360-degree view of what's going on around me, because threats are still there. If I'm 100% focused on what comes next and whatever I'm doing next, bad things tend to occur. So we talk about building a system for a new sales leader. I'd like a new sales leader to be able to have this thing in their back pocket. So just like on the battlefield, they could pull this thing out like a checklist and be ready to roll with it. So with each new system, we understood on the battlefield, we were taking hope and removing just a little bit more of it. We're trimming hope away. So here on Bulletproof Selling, when we talk about systems builds for salespeople, we use this really basic acronym TRIM, because military is big on acronyms, as I'm sure you remember. The T in TRIM is the trigger. So if I'm a new sales leader, what is the trigger element for just getting my bearings, getting my head on right, making sure that I'm setting up in the right way? Might even be before I start coaching my new salespeople, but just making sure that I'm assuming command, right? That's a great military analogy for this. Is this done before I'm appointed a new sales leader? Should each salesperson kind of be looking at what are the first couple of steps? Should they have to assume command? And I know you remember in the military, we were always trained to do the job above us as well, because you never know when that person might get called out of action. Or is this something that I need to really wait on before, I'm appointed, I've got the paperwork, and now I'm in the seat finally as the commander. Change of command ceremonies happened. Now I'm a sales leader. Where should I trigger the first notice of, hey, I better get prepared for what's about to happen?
Well, I mean, there's really three things other than administration that are job responsibilities and should be in every job description of the leader. One is recruiting and retention. Like you said in the beginning, not only attracting people to the team, but retaining people on the team, which is a big issue today. The other is training and being good at training people. And the third thing is coaching. And if you can do those three things in a disciplined way, being held responsible for it so that someone's inspecting what's expected of you, you've got a good system in place. And one of the things we advocate for the frontline sales leader is that every 90 days they sit down and they make a coaching plan, a 90-day coaching plan. They look at every one of the players on their team. They analyze their areas of strength so that they can bring those strengths intentionally to the job every day. And they look at their areas of development, and they sit with that person and they agree to a developmental plan, individualized development plan, not a sheep dip thing where, okay, everybody's going to go through a negotiating skills program. Well, maybe John doesn't need a negotiating skills program, but he could use some business acumen. So he could, justify ROI and create value for a client. So we really advocate individual coaching plans and driving that, and then having all that data roll up so that those at a senior level can see on a day-to-day basis if we're moving the needle. Are we getting more traction with developing the team? And we know from turnover, there's two reasons that people leave a company. One is they don't have developmental opportunities, and the second is they have a lousy manager. So we fix those two problems, if you will. Now nobody's perfect, and we find that the implementations that we have that are most successful is that general at the very top of the sales organization is involved in holding people responsible and accountable for implementing the system. If that person doesn't do it, it atrophies.
Yeah, no system will work without internal support. Absolutely agree with that. So we've got a couple of great trigger elements, which are things that any salesperson could be studying and getting great at doing just in the general course of their professional development that will ideally position them to be a great leader, which is recruiting and retention, being aware of how that's done and how to retain folks. Even if you're only supervising yourself, pay attention to the things that cause you to want to keep working at a company and ask yourself, if I was in the leadership role, how would I do more of that? You talked about training. Well, obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you're into training, you're into sales training. But as a salesperson, what's your training plan? What are the skills that you want to have next quarter that you don't have today? And what's your plan for getting those skills, using them, testing them, refining them? And finally, coaching. Just because you are not a leader doesn't mean that you can't be a great sales coach. One of the things that I advocate new salespeople do, especially veterans transitioning out of the military who happen to be going into the field of sales, is I say make everybody else's mission in the office your mission. In that your job is not just to meet your numbers and to make your activity happen, but it's to do everything you can to help them as well. Show them that you're a team player, not just a solo operator that's going to go off into the wilderness on your own. So great things that we can do to prepare. That's all the trigger element, which sounds like happens long before I'm ever appointed as a sales leader. These are just good things for salespeople to do in general. Now I'm in the R and trim, which is making this process repeatable. So I feel like at this point, maybe I've just been tapped and they're like, hey, John, we need you to step into a leadership role. What are the 3 or 4 or 5 things that I need to make sure are on my checklist that might have a lot of things underneath them, but what are like the big chunks that I should be doing in what order if I'm assuming that leadership role right out of the gate?
Well, and I'm going to add to your scenario, which is often that person's put into the role with the team they used to be on.
Oh, fair, right? Yeah, I got to manage that relationship now too.
That's probably the most difficult one because obviously there's going to be 2 people or more on that team that thought they should have got the job, right?
Sure.
And then there's going to be a group of people that are like really happy that Sean's the new leader. So part of it is building those trust relationships with the people on your team. Leadership is all about followership, and people won't follow you unless they trust you. So you got to kind of diagnose at an individual level, where am I in my relationship with this individual as I'm taking over this team? And that means you got to meet individually with each of those people and have that conversation in a collaborative way to say, look, I'm the new guy and my role is this. I'm responsible for recruiting, retention, training, and coaching. we're going to be doing 90-day coaching plans. I'm going to be traveling on calls with you. So I like to say that they need to set clear expectations and then establish the fact that there will be feedback. I had a client one time, he said, feedback is a gift and I'm Santa Claus.
Nice.
So, also, I mean, one of the things we do teach people how to do is to give good feedback. And so in addition to setting those clear expectations, you have to be able to give feedback. And then finally, I mean, your job is not to do the work. Your job is to be able to orchestrate the resources that that person needs in order to get the job done and make sure they know that they're available and where to find them and how to use them. So those three things, again, try to, simplify it. Really, frontline leader, build that relationship, set the expectations, give them a chance to not only give them feedback, but they're going to give you feedback. It's a two-way street, and then provide the resources that they need to do the job.
And so this leads us perfectly into the iron trim, which is making this thing improvable. We realized on the battlefield, and I'll apply this to Vietnam. We realized, hey, if we're still fighting the way that we did in Korea, our enemy is already up to date on that. They're going to run circles around us. So we have to iterate what we're doing to make sure that it is cutting edge, that it is up to date with technology, the economy that we're in, the people of the country that we're in. So we're constantly improving our systems in the military because we know the world is changing. We can't fight the way we did 10, 15, or 200 years ago. So when we talk about making this thing improvable, something you mentioned earlier was a debrief, and I completely agree. We probably have multiple episodes on great ways to debrief individual calls, to debrief important buyer meetings. But something that I always advocate salespeople do after their debrief, one of the questions they ask is, what resources could my company or my leader have provided to me, knowing what I know about how that call went, that would now allow me, if I had to do that call over again and I had that thing, right, that training, or that delivery timetable, or that discount sheet, whatever it is that would have really been helpful. That's the thing I need to make sure my sales leader knows about. They may not be able to provide it, but it's incumbent upon me to let them know, hey, this thing would have been useful. So I'm curious to know from your seat as a new sales leader, right, where we're going to put you there again, how would you make sure that you're improving the way that you are recruiting and retaining, training and coaching your folks in the first quarter of your new leadership role?
So one of the books I wrote was about coaching communication skills. And we have 4 skills in that program that we teach leaders that are important when you're communicating with others. One is active listening. I mean, it sounds like an old skill, but you know what? People don't do it, and they don't do it very well. And most salespeople have a tendency to listen to respond instead of listening to understand. And so the same is true of sales leaders. So that's one thing. The second is about praising people. Finding somebody doing something right and make sure they know about it. So you're reinforcing those behaviors to see them repeated. The third is providing constructive criticism, giving someone expressing concern about a performance issue in a way that preserves their persona and doesn't make them feel bad, but has them hear the message when it needs to be heard. But the fourth one, which I think relates to your I, is inviting innovation. The world of sales is changing like crazy. And I mean, digital selling and virtual selling and COVID and everything else kind of flip things on its ear. But that means that a sales leader needs to be able to invite innovation from people and work with them to come up with the ideas to improve the current situation. And if you learn that skill, the good news is by doing that, it's not your idea what they should do, but you're working with that representative. It becomes their idea what they should do, and they're more committed to executing it. Whereas if you tell somebody what to do, first of all, they're not learning, they're not growing. But second is they go implement it and it doesn't work. Whose fault is it?
It's your fault. Yeah.
It's my fault. Yeah. I don't want that, right? So we teach people how to invite innovation in those coaching conversations.
In a real easy way, because I've had to manage sales teams and use this exact tactic. Something I remember doing with them was saying, there's a reward, whatever kind, right? Starbucks gift card, cash incentive, whatever reward you want to put together for the person that tries something on a call that pushes the boundary with the prospect. And I don't tell them any more than that, right? It might be, to avoid the brush off and keep going with your questions, or to, figure out a way that you could add value to their lives that has nothing to do with what we sell. right? But figure out a way to press further on the call than what you've been doing. And that looked a bunch of different ways, but it allowed them to innovate. And out of those maybe half a dozen things that my team brought to me, one or two of them were like, why aren't we doing that on every call? So there's always something to recognize and then be able to implement across the team. I love it. So we've got the trigger, repeatable, improvable. I want to get to the M in this trim model, which is making sure this thing is measurable. Because if it's worth me investing the time to continually get better at recruiting and retention, training and coaching, if I'm running this repeatable process, because it takes time to do this with each salesperson, to give them that feedback, that coaching, that constructive criticism. What am I measuring to make sure that I'm implementing this system and it's getting me results? Because I know it's probably not going to be the immediate sales that we generate, because it's going to take salespeople on my team, especially if I used to be one of those salespeople, a little bit of time to get used to me, to get used to producing results. Never mind, I may be in an industry with a lengthy sales cycle. So what am I measuring to make sure that as a leader, things are on track for eventual success?
So we do measurement both at the leadership level and at the rep level, and we use assessment tools to do that are electronic, where the sales force gives feedback to the leader about their coaching skills, and the leader self-evaluates, and they see gaps between what they think they're doing particularly well and what the sales people might not think they're doing so well. And we help them build a coaching development plan for themselves. In terms of the representatives, it's really about, most sales organizations, Sean, are bell-shaped curve. You got some performers at the bottom, you got a bunch of performers in the middle, and you got some performers at the top. And our whole thing when we go in is we identify what that bell-shaped curve looks like and where those performers are. And we say we move the middle, that we're moving the middle over. So level 3, which is the bulk of the salespeople in most organizations, and they make what we call technical tell calls, where they spray and pray and show up and throw up, all those bad things. We're trying to move them up to level 4 and 5. And level 5 is what we call the value creator. Well, if you can shift 20% of that average middle up to level 5, level 4 and 5 salespeople on average produce about 53% more revenue than an average performer. So you don't have to move that needle very far to see some really good results top line. And we measure and track everything. We start out a project by saying, okay, what are the metrics you want to measure? We're going to come back every 90 days and look at them and see if we're moving the needle. All that information rolls up through that 90-day plan.
And I imagine the things that we're tracking on that bell curve are not just closed sales, but engagement from prospects, pipeline velocity. There's a bunch of leading indicator metrics that could let me know early on, from where I started, are we moving that bell curve over, would you say?
Yeah. And the biggest leading indicator of anything is the quality of that call. How many quality level 4 and 5 calls did you make? And we actually get down to the behavioral level at every one of those levels of 1 through 5. And we help the sales organization and the sales rep understand. They can walk out of a call. I can turn to you and say, Sean, where do you think I was on that call? You'd say, well, you tell me, John. And I'd say, that's kind of level 3, wasn't I? Yeah, well, why do you think that? Well, I was talking too much. I didn't ask very many good questions, did I? No, but we had a call plan that you had some questions on, but somehow you never got to them, right? So
never got to them. Yeah.
That's the beauty of having a contextual common language around what good looks like, because you can't coach to something you don't understand what good looks like. It's like you said, when you're cleaning your rifle, there's a process, there's steps to follow. There's things that you do time and time again, repeatable, like you said. Same thing in a good quality sales call. Unfortunately, I just say, unfortunately, we still find that sales leaders, report to us that they spend, 40% of their time coaching calls. But when we actually go in and look at it, they're probably spending only about 15%. And that 15%, even though they're spending it, they're not doing it very well. So we got a double whammy. And the biggest concern we encounter all the time is they say, I don't have time to coach. And
of course. Yeah. Too busy doing everything else. Yeah. The one thing, it's almost like fitness, right? I know a lot of us, I don't have time to work out. Yeah. You don't not have time to stay in shape and be healthy. because it will have downstream effects on everything else in your life. So if you're going to prioritize anything, prioritize that and do less everywhere else, because with more energy, you'll get more done. So I totally agree with you. Totally understand that. Well, John, I want to make sure people can get out there and use this, especially if they're on the track to be a sales leader or they just stepped into a sales role. They've been furiously taking notes. They want to go out there and implement it. If they want to know more about you, about level 5 sales, how do they get a hold of your book? How do they get a hold of you? How do we get deeper into your world?
So my email address is john@level5selling, all spelled out.com, john@level5selling.com. My cell, you can text or call me, is 480-235-5582, 480-235-5582. Our website is level5selling.com. And we're very prominent on LinkedIn. Please follow our company page. And, any of your listeners, if they're in that role of taking over a sales organization and they want to find out more about the system, I'm happy to send them the book, Level 5 Coaching System, complimentary copy.
How could you not take advantage of that offer? I mean, that's probably the best offer they're going to get all week for something that's going to be valuable and actually help them do well as a new sales leader. So thanks so much for that, John. Make sure that we're tagging you all in the show notes so people know how to get a hold of you. For those of you listening to Bulletproof Selling here, if you're catching us on live stream, that's great. If you're not, make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel where every single one of these archives is housed. So if you're interested in getting the face-to-face view of these conversations, it's all on YouTube. Maybe you're listening to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. Best thing you can do is leave us a review to help other salespeople know that hope does not have to be part of their sales strategy. They can be bulletproof in how they sell by removing that hope one sales system at a time. And of course, to John and his organization, thank you, sir, for coming on the show, serving the sales community. Let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.
Sean, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.